Good evening, folks. Joe Biden, Superintendent of Norton Public Schools. Thanks for coming out tonight for our public safety forum this evening with our local officials, including school department personnel, Norton Fire Department, Norton Police Department, members of the school committee, administration, and legal counsel that are here this evening. We'll go through tonight in taking a look at some topics that I think will be of interest to you. You'll find that a lot of public comment and safety concerns from my office circulate around executive session with the Norton Police Department and not in public comment area. That's 100% around public safety for us in terms of what we share and don't share with information and what we can legally share and not share. We take, as a district, safety and our protocols significantly as a priority in the district. We have spent millions of your dollars over the last 10 years in upgrades to our facilities around security and security only, software, over 150 cameras throughout the district as well within our buildings and increasing. Key fobs, windows that have penetration support, the 3 new windows within our elementary schools that was put together a few years ago, and protocols and procedures for folks that come from the outside. Let me just say a few words about perfection. There is no such thing as perfection when it comes to safety. We are constantly, just yesterday, thanks to Chief Clark, I received the now published School Security and Best Practices Guide from the Massachusetts Chiefs of Police Association, which was just put together, which Chief Clark was a member this past fall. We are also in communication with state police. We are also in communication with the FBI, and we are also in communication with the Secret Service, just that everybody knows. Sorry. So when we look at the dynamics of the information and what's out there, we are trying to utilize all of our resources that we can to put the plans in place that allow for us to stay as safe as we possibly can. But I want to mention that word perfection again. It is not perfect. As you know, and what is happening in the world today is pretty harsh for any of us. As a parent, I am also a parent of a child in this district. It is difficult to read and see what's happening in the world. This is not a forum about what you believe in the Second Amendment or any other type of information. This is a forum about how we are trying to keep our children and our staff safe every single day. A few other comments that I think are important is we collaborate almost daily with our public safety. Everything from an issue of a fire alarm to an issue of a fight. All of those types of topics happen in every public school in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Fortunately for us, so far, we can say that in Massachusetts we've been pretty safe. Hate to say that out loud, right? But the issue I still think before us is how are we trying every day to make ourselves better? So you'll be seeing things, or you might have seen things if you come into the building around the Raptor. You have to put your ID in, basically reviews if you have any type of a police record, both in-state and nationally. All of our employees are now fingerprinted as part of state regulation. Massachusetts was the last state to do that. And Corey, which was the norm. Corey's basically take a look at what's happening in Massachusetts, fingerprinting our national. And anyone who comes into the country, folks like me that became citizens, et cetera, are part of that protocol as well. The protocols we put into place internally include employees leaving the building after the business day begins are only through the front door. No side door access anymore, except when coming into the building for the start of the school day, and at the end of the day when they're leaving. Once they're here, everyone is coming and going through the front door, signing in and signing out through our system. We have a new system in place that we're putting across all the schools for our employees, including those employees that are shared within the district. Lastly, we've also put in new protocols for recess at the 3 elementary schools. Most of those protocols have not been seen by your children or by you, but they have been put together by my staff with support from our school resource officers. And those protocols are all around access into the building in case of a situation outside of the building. So tonight's general idea is to provide you some, as I said, top-down type of information, 35,000 feet type of information for you to have, and to hopefully feel more comfortable about what we're trying to do on a daily basis. And when I say daily basis, I'll give you an example. Just upon returning from the holiday break, we walked all 5 buildings. We looked at every single exit door. We looked for any doors that were propped. We looked for any doors whose locks weren't working correctly. We looked and looked and looked, and I can tell you right now, very happy to report we had one incident of a situation. We actually don't think the door was propped. We actually think that a rock, a small pebble attached underneath it and got to it because it was such a finite piece of rock, if you will. But those are the type of things that we're looking at. We're getting to that level on a regular basis. And we've also established very specific memos with the Norton School Committee and the employees of the district as it pertains to expectations within the building, including locked doors at all times. And by locked, I mean the door is locked, not necessarily fully closed. We have protocols for that in place as well, so that no one is looking for a key to be able to put into the keyhole and lock the door and secure the classroom. The classrooms are now completely locked at the handle, and then they may be ajar, but there's a protocol that we have within those doors that allows for them to be closed and locked immediately. And in some cases, they're direct deadbolts as well. So that's the big overview from the superintendent, and we'll take Q&A next. I want to thank our guests for coming and taking an evening out, and I'll start with Mr. Searcy just to do quick introductions, their name and their title.
I am Vinny Searcy. I'm the Director of People Personnel Services here for Norton.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jennifer O'Neill. I am the Assistant Superintendent for Teaching and Learning.
I'm Brooke Shadow, Middle School Resource Officer.
Jacob Dennett, the School Resource Officer assigned here at the high school.
Hello, my name is Brian Clark. I'm the Chief of Police here in Norton. Hello, Sean Simmons, Fire Chief.
Jason Robbins, Deputy Fire Chief.
Dan Sheedy, Norton School Committee Chairperson.
Over to my right is Roseanne DePietro, who's legal counsel to the district. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Chief Clark and our SROs for their first part of their thoughts and communication about the police department and our school resource officers.
Thank you. Just a couple of quick things that I wanted to go over, a little bit maybe of history through school security and what we've done here. First and foremost, I think safety is certainly paramount to the police department as it involves the schools. I went through the school system here. My 2 kids went through the school system here. My mother worked in the school system for 25 years, and my daughter has been subbing in the school system. So to say that school safety is very important to me, I think would be an understatement. Back in the 80s, we started to see officers in particular have a little bit more of a role in the schools, you know, a little traffic safety, coming in and talking to kids, reading books and things. And then in the early 90s, we started the DARE program. And that evolved, you know, right around 1994 for a few years where we had an officer that started, and then towards the end we had 3 or 4 officers, 1 state trooper that was involved in the DARE program. So it got us into the schools, got us into the elementary school, got a face, got somebody people could talk to.
Only off Avenue.
That's right, Peter. And then in 1999, Columbine happened. And that really changed the way we looked at things, right? If you remember, the officers basically stood around the building waiting for a SWAT team while there was an active shooter incident going on inside. And that really changed the way we did things. We started to have training on how to deal with the threat, and we've been doing it for over 20 years, to be quite honest with you. It's evolved quite a bit, but you know, the basis has really remained the same. Back around 2006 to about 2014, we started a part-time school resource officer program assigned to the detective division. We thought it was important. Actually, Sergeant Dennett was the first school resource officer here in town. We also reinstituted the DARE program in 2008, and we initiated the ALICE program shortly after that. In the fall of 2014, we started the first full-time school resource officer, And again, that was Sergeant Dennett, primarily in the high school. He has an office just down the hall from here, and it was primarily in the high school. But what we saw was that there was definitely a need for the other schools and just being a resource overall. So in December of 2019, we put Mark Robichaud into the middle school setting where he has an office over there. And they kind of both share the middle schools, the elementary schools right now. And really the purpose is just to foster a healthy environment and be a resource to the community, the staff, the faculty, and basically the public and the kids. So one of the things that we try to do is divert kids from the criminal justice system. And one thing that's come up out of the police reform and the rhetoric that's out there is that there's a school to jail pipeline, which is just totally false, at least in this area. I can't speak for the more urban settings, but what we do is not arrest kids and bring them to jail. We work with them and work with the families and work with the school to make sure that they have the appropriate resources. The superintendent just mentioned the best practices document. When I was sitting on that committee, I reviewed that, what's called a PASS document. It's over 100 pages. And what I found is that we, as a community, are following all the best practices. I'll just let you know what a couple of them are. It's collaboration and assessment. We have a very good working relationship with the school system. I've talked to the superintendent regularly, the SROs too, about a whole variety of different topics. Our phones are always open and we answer, so we're always talking to each other. We have a great relationship. We have good planning. We talk about security needs. We also talk about prevention, assessment teams, social media monitoring, bullying campaign. It's all things that are established here. We also talk about mitigation, which is room hardening, and our school resource officers do a great job of working with the staff on that. And then response is, like I said, we've trained to do active shooter type of response or response to the schools. And that has morphed over the last number of years, and we train regularly with the fire department as well. We have in the fall, and we will be again in the beginning of February. So another aspect that we've kind of added this year, in 2021, is we have a mental health clinician. I don't know if everybody's aware of that, but we have a mental health clinician that works 20 hours a week with us. And it's been a huge asset, not only to the police department, when she's riding along with the officers, doing follow-ups. We've done over 400 follow-ups since March of 2021, but also to the school system, to the veterans agent, to the human service director. It's just been a really big asset. And some of her role, we talk about diverting from the criminal justice system, but we also divert from the emergency room, where in the past we might file a Section 12 on somebody that's either homicidal or suicidal. And the clinician comes in and can make that determination right away and basically say, yes, somebody's in crisis and in need of service, but no, they can handle this by this route. So we've kind of alleviated some hospital issues as well. So we've been kind of involved in the schools. Certainly High Five Friday. We've done the Kathy Bailey game here. From the Community Policing network engagement and stuff. We've recently, this past fall, we've trained 2 more officers who are trained school resource officers. They're not full-time, obviously funding's an issue, but they do have some face time in the elementary schools that take some stress off of the officers here. So, with that, that's kind of my opening statement. So, thank you.
I can assure you, as a superintendent of schools in the Commonwealth, there is no community that has this type of detail in terms of the amount of information that goes on between the departments and on a daily basis. And I'll give you an example. There aren't school districts that have 2 SROs that are our size. There aren't school districts that have other trained SROs that are on the road and get to stop in at the elementary schools on a regular basis. That's not happening everywhere. That's happening in Norton, and that's, to be quite honest, that's Chief Clark's work in figuring it out and prioritizing it. And I just wanted to bring up our SROs briefly, if one of the 2 of them wants to come up, or actually can do it from there if you'd like, just to give a brief overview of what does a day look like for an SRO Not too much we don't do a lot of detail, as I said earlier. But if you could take a look at just some of the things that they do on a daily basis.
I think each day is a little different. Is that better? Each day is a little different. I think just most of the kids, for those of you that don't know, most of the kids call me RoboCop. You always see me handing out stickers, working with Jake. What we're really trying to do is just build trust with the kids. You know, we want them to, if there's a problem, they want to come to us. If they're scared about something, come to us, talk to us. We want to have a long-lasting relationship so that they're not afraid. You know, the kids nowadays are on social media, right? Their face is planted in these things. And a lot of their problems or bullying issues come through the cell phone, and they don't feel comfortable talking to some people. And I think that's really what we're trying to do, is just build the trust that they can come to us and feel comfortable.
We were at a training 2 years ago, and there was like 8 people at our table, all SROs, and I won't name the community, but there was a gentleman across the table from us, and I'd say almost bragging how like he stays in his office all day. If there's something that comes up, the principal takes the report, hands him the report, and he just files it. If the charge is going to be warranted, whatever would go off. And we talked to him on the way home, like, if that guy's completely missing the boat, like if something ever happens in that school or is going to happen in that school, he's going to be the last one to find out, the last one to hear about it. And that's like every day with us. It's like, in my building here, I know he does the same in his. As long as there's nothing else going on, I'm at the door, greet the kids coming in, like that foundation, those relationships start right off the bat. To the point, I got a voicemail on my phone just the other day from a student that graduated 4 years ago. Actually had a part in his arrest at one point, outside of school, but and part of his message was he was calling me because he needed help. He knew he could trust me. And like that didn't just happen. Like that takes, and again, I was part of that kid being arrested, but yet he still reached out to us, you know, to me for this issue that he's dealing with right now. And that, to me, that speaks volumes. And I think that starts the guys swinging through the elementary school, and there's nothing better than going to yellow school gym class and playing floor hockey, but unfortunately most days don't allow for that. But those relationships start there. I did a thing for Solomons this afternoon with, you know, kindergarten through third graders. All that starts there, and not that the benefits come out up here, but when something's going on, they know they can come to you. It's a uniform, it's a policeman, whatever, but it's someone that they trust, it's someone that they can work with and get whatever help it is that they need. If it's something going on at home, something going on with a friend of theirs. You know, Mark's office at the middle school wasn't like an official office there, and they moved him now, but one of the big things, one of the options was to put him in the back of the main office. And immediately I'm like, that's never going to work. Like, the kids are not going to go back there, they're not going to see you, and you're going to lose that access. And it's a huge aspect of what we do. And you hear it time and time again where something's gone on, and more often than not, there's some sort of leakage, there's some sort of information that's kind of trickling out about kind of what's going on behind the scenes. And the quicker that can get, you know, in front of us or other investigators, other school staff to try to do interventions and do things. You know, once something happens, if we're super trained to handle all that, to respond to all that, a great relationship with our fire guys. We've done a ton of cooperative training with them, collaborations with them, with us, with the school folks. It's been years and years and years in the making, and it works here. It works tremendously well here. But all of that said, and all that being as good as it is, it's too late at that point. Like the best thing that we can ever do is prevent something. And we've been very, very fortunate over the years with a number of incidents in our community. People would not believe some of the stuff that goes on in this little town. But we've been able to prevent a lot of things along the way, and for the most part, all with a very, very good outcome. The chief mentioned about diversion, and you know, I've been doing this 12, 14 years now, something like that. I've had to arrest one student in this building, and it was the absolute, probably the worst day of my whole time doing this. It was the last thing I wanted to do, and I don't say this lightly, we had no other option in that incident. But again, with that young lady, she came back after she graduated, had to get something in the office for school. She asked to see me. She asked to talk to me and say hello. I saw her 2 summers ago. She was rapping on the side of my cruiser. I'm on a job, and she had every reason to walk right by, but she sought out, when she saw it was me in that seat, sought out to say hello. And that's the last kid that probably had a reason to do so, but she did. And again, that's all, everything that we've done here along the way to build what we have, to put us in the best position that we can be with everything we have going on.
Thank you. I just wanted to add a couple of things, or at least one more, and that is our communication around searches, and specifically drug searches. Well, I worked along with the chief on that and making the determination when is the right time to do it based on any type of information that we might have, or maybe it's a good time to do it. We've done it in the past. When we've done it, I always communicate after the incident. Just to let you know, I am not the first person to know that the dogs, search dogs are coming. That works through typically the SROs and the chief. And then when they're coming in, I get to find out. The schools don't know about it, the administrators don't know about it. They just know that it can happen. And so just keep mindful of that as well. So we're going to shift the conversation a little bit to the idea of students and their well-being. And I'm going to have Vinnie Cerci, our Director of PPS, and Jen O'Neill, our Assistant Superintendent, speak about this. This is a critical area pre-COVID and risen to a whole nother level post-COVID. I want to say that again. It was here pre-COVID, but it's risen to a whole nother level. Students' well-being, where students are in terms of their psychology on a daily basis and needs. So I'll turn it over to them for some information.
Okay, thank you very much. I just want to take a few seconds to sort of follow up on this. I came from an urban district. I spent 25 years in a pretty large urban district with its own school police force, and was very much involved in some of the programs where you might think that the school police officers would be involved in. And in all of those years, I did not see the kind of relationships that the two gentlemen here built with our kids and support not only the kids, I've seen them supporting families through difficult times and staff as well. So, you know, I unfortunately have a lot of experience in those kinds of situations, but I cannot praise the two gentlemen here enough in terms of how they work with our kids. And they truly divert many issues. And being involved in many of the situations with students who are having a psychiatric crisis, and some of the things that go along with that. Adding the clinician, Corey, who I mostly work with, I know there's some other folks, she's been a huge addition to all the support that we can offer those students and the families as well. So I just want to take a second to personally thank you guys for that. Unfortunately, you know, the pandemic absolutely made things much more difficult on our students and our families, especially certain students. And as noted here, we really do have a mental health crisis in our country right now, and Norton is not an exception to that. We're seeing some of these same trends, obviously at a smaller level than some of our larger urban districts, but again, given our size, we're seeing some of that as well. And this really has been going on for about 10 years now. The pandemic absolutely has exacerbated a lot of these things, but social media, the stress that students are feeling, and to be honest, the opioid crisis has definitely added to a lot of the things that our students are experiencing, that their families are dealing with. All right, there we go. So here's a whole bunch of statistics, and I'm not going to read through each and every one of those here because I think it's more important we get to talk about the things that we're doing. But in terms of the issues our students are facing, we're seeing a marked increase in diagnosis of depression and anxiety with our students. They're feeling lots of stress, as we said, around social media, around academics, around all kinds of things that go on as a teenager and as a child in our society today. I think one of the most important things to look at there is that an adolescent dies every 100 minutes, making it the third leading cause of death for young people ages 15 to 24. We work with a number of agencies, which we're going to get into in a little bit, to help prevent these kinds of tragedies from happening here. And I'm not even going to say it, but I think we do a really good job of doing that so far. But we need to be vigilant all the time. One of the things that we've seen an increase in is how students feel and young people feel about being connected, not just to schools, but to their communities and to each other. The pandemic absolutely increased that feeling of isolation. And if you look at any of the research around some of the safety issues, both for individual students and then for groups as a whole, isolation, feeling isolated and disconnected is the #1 cause for self-harm or harm to others. So this is something we have to focus on as a community, not just here at the school, but that's why we're engaging many of the community providers that you're going to hear us talk about a little later on. And what we're also seeing is, as I said, that there's an increase in the number of students that and children that require outpatient and even partial hospital or inpatient care due to suicidal ideation or thoughts of harming themselves or others. We're seeing an uptick in behavioral outbursts and emotional dysregulation from our youngest kids all the way up to our high schoolers. And again, this is not isolated here to Norton, but it is happening. At this point, we see about 1% of our student population has had to have a screening and been either hospitalized on an inpatient or partial hospital level. And our feeling is we need to do as much preventative work as we can to support those students and those families and prevent that from happening by increasing their connection to us, to their community, and to each other. So we're going to spend the next few minutes, or Jen is, talking about how we're trying to do that.
All right, you already covered that slide too. Look at that. Thank you, everyone. As Vinny mentioned, that we are really seeing a huge increase in the number of students that need support here. And it's not just a Norton issue. However, because the safety of our students and our staff is always our #1 job, we have taken these challenges very seriously and been working collaboratively as an administrative team with our principals, with our staff here in Norton, and also with a lot of outside agencies to make sure we're offering our students and our families the most support that we can. When we look at targeted staffing, we have a number of staff members here whose sole focus is to support students with some of their mental health challenges. We have 8 school adjustment counselors district-wide, 7 guidance counselors at the middle school and the high school, 5 school psychologists, as well as 2 board-certified behavior analysts. And they are working in teams on a day-to-day basis to support students. We also have 6 specialized programs across our schools, specifically for students with emotional disabilities. And these programs really provide them with the support, the academic supports, but also therapeutic services built into their programs so that they can have a positive experience in accessing the academic curriculum. And finally, at the high school, we have what we call the Bridge. And the Bridge is for students that may have been out of school for a longer period of time, whether it was a medical issue or a partial hospitalization due to emotional challenges. And what the Bridge does is it really does create a bridge from their challenge back into the classroom where they are receiving supports, kind of helping ease their transition back to a regular high school day. And we've had very, very successful stories that have come out of the Bridge in order to help our students come back into the classroom. As I mentioned, we are working with a lot of outside agencies around supporting our students. So recently, we actually updated our suicide risk assessment toolkit and our protocols that go along with this, making sure that we are looking at our students and following practices that are based on the latest research. We have a new crisis management manual that is looking at trauma and how to support students and families and our staff in the case of a death of a staff member or a student. And then we also work with Community Counseling of Bristol County, that they come into our schools and will provide in-school counseling services for students that are in need, especially when families are having difficulty accessing mental health services outside of the school. And actually, we just have started a grant process with 3 other Massachusetts school districts and Boston Children's Hospital to identify, train our staff, and then also develop protocols for district-wide threat assessment teams. These teams will look at individual student challenges and determine what the next best steps are for them in terms of supports. In addition to those, we also work with the BIPO Collaborative, which is a special education collaborative located in Franklin. And they have programs in many of our local schools. They are partnered with us to provide a child psychologist for our mental health concerns. We work with Dr. Jeff Turley, who is a board-certified child psychiatrist, who comes out at least 8 times a year to provide evaluations as needed. And then we also are partnered with the I-Decide program out of Massachusetts General Hospital, which is offered to students that are having difficulty with substance abuse problems. And it's a great educational program for students to engage in when they want to stop those behaviors. And our school staff, our guidance counselors, our adjustment counselors are really able to work with the students through this program and offer it to families as well. We know that your students are only with us for 6.5 hours a day, and the rest of their time they are at home with their families and guardians. So it's really important that if a student is having a difficult time here at school, that we're also offering support to their families as well to help them through some of these challenges. We work with Epione and Sarah's Village to provide families with up to 10 free sessions of mental health counseling. We also work with the Reads Collaborative to provide in-home supports for their family support program. We work with the Child Advocacy Center through the DA's office to support students and families that have experienced physical or sexual abuse. And they also provide workshops to our students, specifically at the high school, on digital safety and exploitation. We know that unfortunately not everyone on the internet is who they say they are. And sometimes our middle school students and our high school students are very susceptible to that. So we talk about exploitation. And then one of the other things that we offer to our family, not just our families, but actually to the entire Norton community, is the Interface Referral Service through William James College. Any resident of Norton can use this service, and the interface will connect you with mental health providers. They'll help you figure out the insurance component of working with a provider and help you to find the supports that you need depending on what your unique situation is. And I think that is something that not a lot of people in the community realize, that it's available for everyone, which is great. One of the major challenges for those of us who have been in education for a while is the way that the role has changed over the years. We are so much more than just teachers to our students now. We are really trying to work to support them with the challenges that they come with us. And therefore, our teachers and our staff need the tools in their toolbox to be able to handle a question that may come up from a student or help them address a problem. So we've partnered with Leslie University to offer the trauma-sensitive schools courses. So far, we have had over 120 staff members district-wide take at least the first course. And many of our staff members have also taken courses 2 and 3. Recently, Vinny and I just put out an interest form to our staff to see if people were still interested in these courses. And we got such a positive feedback. We're going to be running courses 1, 2, and 3, and they're all totally filled up after like maybe 12 hours. We do have to run a lottery. The teachers really find this professional development to be valuable for their roles in working with students. Some of our adjustment counselors are going to a collaborative training in Holliston later this month in psychological first aid. And then Vinny and I and one of our BCBAs, Carrie Sumner, just recently were awarded a $150,000 grant from the Department of Education that is going to support us in looking at our structures and processes for screening students in terms of how they are doing with SEL, how they are doing with behavioral and mental health concerns, and also looking at our curriculum and how we can support students in some of these ways. So as you can see, there's a lot of challenges that we're dealing with in our schools at this time, but we are trying very hard to make sure that we are addressing student needs as they come up, and we're so fortunate to have so many great community partners here as well. Thank you.
Just wanted to add a few things that I think is really important. If you're a parent, like I am, and I'm not dealing with the issue personally, try to find a child to counsel outside of school. It's impossible. Between insurance issues and the lack of counselors available, it's impossible. So we are really pushing our parents to speak to us, to talk to us about those issues as a combination of school and home working to address the issues. I sit on the Mass Partnership for Youth board and on its executive board. And when I heard that there was going to be threat assessment grant opportunity, I jumped right on it. I said, why wouldn't we want to train our staff on threat assessment? It's a $670,000 grant that's through Children's Hospital, using components of training from the FBI and the Secret Service, and provides us opportunity to be able to really look at a student and take a look at the threat that the student is part of. We will have threat assessment teams, which we have, but are going through this particular training. That must include our SROs. It must include our SROs in it. It must include staff that know the child, not just another staff member that maybe doesn't know the child, who could also be part of that team. So that comes out of research around the best practices to keep and to provide direct services to a student. So to Sergeant Denon and Officer Robichaud's prior comments, that's why the men in blue for us matter, because they're attempting to make those relationships so that we have that information when in fact the threat assessment may come in. The other part is the interface, again, was something that we came upon. I'll tell you a quick story. All you have to do is go to our website, hit the interface, and it takes you right to it with all the direct numbers. They help you through. You can call them at midnight, you can call them at 8 in the morning, you can call them on weekends and vacations. And what they do is they'll work with you to try to find that support for substance abuse, mental health, whatever it is, and also work with you in terms of what insurance you may or may not have and or need in order to be able to get to that level, because that's always an issue that comes to the forefront. Quick story, it took 3 weeks after we had the interface running for me to get my first email of a parent at the elementary level who was trying to support their child and couldn't find a counselor. It took 3 weeks for that parent to email us and just simply say, thank you for this, I can't believe that I was able to get somebody right away after months of attempting to try to get in front of the line with their child. So I wanted to mention those particular comments because I think it's important, and it's free. It's free to you. It's not free because you're paying for it through your tax dollars. But the fact of the matter is it's not an extra bill in your pocket, which I think is important for you to recognize.
Maybe explain the Epione in Sarah's Village.
Yeah, the Epione and Sarah's Village are also free. Those are being supported through very generous gifts and contracts. Unfortunately, in one particular case, one of our staff members lost their child to suicide and started a foundation, and that foundation is named after her. She was a student in another district, but they've granted us the opportunity to be able to give 10 sessions to a student who's struggling with their own mental health. What a way to give back to a community. And they're doing that with us, and I believe it's Easton Public School where they actually reside. Those are the only two communities that currently have it. So we thank them.
Epione does that.
And,
bare minimum.
right, and Epione is the same. So we're providing the services and trying to deal with some of you that are in the audience and folks that aren't here tonight. Hopefully will watch the video because it is being recorded and will be uploaded. The idea is to target mental health and substance abuse from a preventative level, of course, but there's always going to be a reactive level, right? Something went wrong, and we're here to try to extend ourselves to you folks and support you. And lastly on this topic, before I bring up discussions from our fire department, and in our police department as well, is there are 44 bills filed right now in the state legislature. 44 bills on student mental health. 44 bills. It's the most in the history of the Commonwealth. I happen to sit on the Superintendent Association Legislative Committee, so I get that information up front. We have a meeting coming up. One bill that's filed is to have every student identification card, not only have it on them, but that it has to have the suicide hotlines and substance abuse hotlines on the card. So the student doesn't have to go looking for it. It's available to them right on their ID. And that is slated to become state law probably as soon as next July, is what we're hearing. We're also seeing a new bill that just passed where we can't find beds for students. So let's talk about that for a little bit. Your child has gone in to the hospital. What's happening right now in many cases, I can tell you this from cases here in Norton, and I can tell you this from other discussions with leaders in other districts. 5-10 days in the hallway in a bed at the hospital. 5-10 days in the hallway of a hospital not being seen. That is not the hospital's fault. They just don't have the beds. It's just, this is how overwhelming some of these numbers are. And then trying to connect that student. There's also students that sometimes we believe need to go through that process of being screened out by the hospitals. And what we have seen is they're overwhelmed with the number of cases. And so thanks to the police department's work, Corey, the social worker for the police department, I can't tell you how often she's come to the school department and supported us in the screening of the student. And has stopped that from going to the hospital. All of this with parental communication, by the way, in terms of the individual student needs. But the key is that we have the police department also trying to help out with making sure that these connections are being made. I want to talk a little bit about communication because I think it's probably the most important part. Collaboration is step one in everything to do with safety. So the structures and organized based on topic is that we are organized by topic as a district. So if we have a bomb threat, there's a protocol for that. If we have a unfortunate firearm situation, there's a process for that. If we have a fight, there's a process for that. If there's an issue on the bus, there's a process for that. And if there's a student that needs to be, and I'll share this story really briefly. When we first started to see Chief, probably what, 5-6 years ago, we started to see the ramp up of some of the mental health situations with students at the, let's say, middle grade levels and higher. One of the things that the Chief and I talked about was protocol and practice. And it was who should be there. Now the guys in red have ambulances, right? They're there to put them in the ambulance and take them. But what we were seeing was a little reluctancy from some of the students' aggressions in terms of seeing the police. So what we decided to do is we decided that police is important. We need them in the area for safety, but they're not going to be right there. We're going to lead it to the people that are going to take them to their place of support with mental health, which is our fire department. Or the parents, if the parent is picking the child up. So that simple protocol was just a way for us to make sure that our students are seeing police in a positive way, number one, but number two, that they're getting what they need right away from the fire department. And Chief Simmons, I'll turn it over to you in terms of some of the other protocols that we have that you might want to mention.
Yeah, I think you guys already hit on a lot of the key points. From a fire department perspective, I'll tell you that we're very proactive and progressive regarding school safety. I have kids in the school. Many of our members have kids in the school as well. Every single school is inspected 4 times a year. Every single school has 4 fire drills per year. Regarding active shooter incidents, all of our personnel are well trained in active shooter incidents. That initial training is done in conjunction with police officers, so that training is provided like it would be in real world situations. So, in addition to that, we train with the police department regularly. We do simulation exercises in schools. We've used this school before. We've used other buildings. We come up with scenarios that are as realistic as we can make them. We have people pretend to be victims, and we treat it like it's a real thing. So we do that regularly. We also do tabletop exercises, which would consist of a lot of us sitting in a classroom, talking through these types of incidents and troubleshooting, certain things, and responding to certain things. All of our fire apparatus have ballistic gear on them, so we all have the ballistic helmets and vests. I never thought we'd have to have that in
in my career, but we do, so that we're prepared to go into the police if we need to. So we have a great working relationship with our police department, with the schools, and anytime we go in for an inspection or we need to collaborate on something, they were always receptive and right there to support us, and we try to do the same in return for them. We also have pretty comprehensive standard operating procedures for the active shooter incidents. Our 911 dispatch center, which is a regional dispatch center now, is also integrated into this training, and they're part of our emergency response plan, should such an event like that happen. In addition to that, if we were to have a situation like that, we literally have an unlimited amount of resources at our disposal just through calling regional dispatch, and we also have pre-packaged response groups too that we can request if needed. So we're pretty well prepared for that kind of stuff. In addition, we've also assisted with COVID testing, assisted with vaccinations, and we just try to help out, wherever we can. If you have any answer to questions that you may have either now or afterwards.
Thanks, Chief, and Deputy Robbins for coming as well. I think it's really important for you folks to just simply recognize from the 35,000 feet that we're talking from, that the amount of detail that goes into this takes numerous hours, and it's 24/7. I can't tell you how many vacation days the SROs and I and the police chief have had a phone call. It's not one day in the 10 years that I've been here. It's been double-digit days on situations that take place outside of school that may have a connection to school or may not. But the fact is, we try to cross our T's and dot our I's as much as we can. The last part of this is the amount of training that goes through. That's 6 figures of training every year that we put out to our staff. Hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of training that we put in just around mental health and school safety protocols and procedures that are required. Some of them by law, some of them by best practice. Massachusetts is one of the only states in the nation that does not have a threat assessment requirement. We don't have, as a state legislature, there's a bill filed now, by the way, and it comes out of a lawsuit, actually out of the state of California, so somebody in the state picked that up. But we've had crisis teams in our districts for decades, but threat assessment teams are something that is new, and we're one of the 4 districts that's actually getting that deep dive training as part of that. Okay. So, the most difficult part to talk about when it comes to this are the legal topics around what I, as a parent, would want to know more about if I was sitting in your seat. But I can't tell you. I can't get into certain specifics with you about an incident because I have a minor involved, or minors, and I have legal requirements. So from, let's say, an SRO incident, or an incident that involved our SROs, this is the direct line. This is the next direct line. What can I say? What can I say? How specific can I be? I can assure you, as your superintendent, I have ridden that line pretty hard throughout the years in providing the best information. Some of it probably allows for you to, for lack of a better phrase, read between the lines. But in most cases, if you're not getting a certain piece of information, is because under state statute, maybe even federal law, but in most cases state statute, I can't give you that information. What changes with all of this is the unfortunate incidents like Sandy Hook and all of those. Then everything changes when it comes to that in terms of information that becomes available to families. Not only in the unfortunate negative situation of those that are deceased in those situations, but also things like who was the person who did it, so on and so forth. So an example that's always difficult is student makes a statement. That statement triggers a number of faculty and administrators and staff members to come together and decide, along with our SROs in every case that I know of since I've been here, we try to make a determination on the threat. In some cases, that might go on for hours, even days. The ones on the weekends always seem like they're months. In many cases, it's about getting families to agree to a search. to, do you have a gun in your home? Does anybody in your home have the right to carry? And that's also verified by the police department, by the way. If you do have guns, who has access to them? Where are they? Those types of conversations. And of course, those conversations take a long time to get answers to because it is nerve-wracking, a process to have that happen in one's home. And then the question becomes, well, how much information do you have? So the fact is, the specifics of police were at the person's house, there are no guns, so on and so forth. You're not going to get that specific type of information. You're going to get the assessment took place, and based on law enforcement, the general thought is all are safe. The impact of these topics, though, are very evident on your Facebook accounts, maybe not yours specifically, but one particular Facebook account in this town, and folks who go on it, who make inaccurate, false accusations around student safety and public safety in general within our community. And I can share stories that are out there since it's Facebook and they're public. The chief and I have one that goes back a number of years ago where the chief had to call someone and basically say, could you please take that down, it's not accurate. It was fourth or fifth grader, I don't know if the chief remembers this, was a fourth grader who went home and decided to put on Facebook that police were at the Yale Elementary School shooting up the school because there was a deer running through the school. It's a true story. And the parent just takes that and puts it right on Facebook like it's, it's the Bible. And here we go, right? The phone starts ringing off the hook and, how come you didn't tell us? And so on. So that's not what happened. None of that happened. The police weren't here. There wasn't a SWAT team. There was no lockdown. There was a state order. We had a teacher taken out on an ambulance because of her medical situation. So these are the things also that become these social media truths that just aren't. We do seek your input and advice on information, and I get it through emails. Some of them good constructive criticism, some of them not factually based on theory and or in most cases political views. My job is to make sure that when the school's open in the morning, your children and my staff are safe. And like almost every person up here who has commented about having their children in the school system or their family members work, I forgot to mention that my wife works in the school system. Not only do I have my daughter here, and I choose to send my daughter here, we're a choice family, but my wife has been working here for 20 years. So every day that we have a discussion about safety, don't think that I'm not thinking about the two precious people I have at home and the other 2,432 kids, because that's what we do. My administration is huge on safety in the building. It doesn't matter what time of the day it is, we get the phone calls, right? This is what we do in Norton. We're that in tuned into trying to make sure that we're addressing the safety of what's happening in schools. And there can be these little bitty things or these things that could become something that's significant. But social media is really in many ways, quote, the death of us when it comes to some of these situations, which is unfortunate. And we have a lot of views of that as administrators, and I'm sure several of the folks up here, because they cause more time away from learning and teaching and doing good things because of having to push back. I personally stay away from one-to-one communications about stuff on Facebook. I am happy to tell you that at the age of almost 54, I've never had a Facebook account and I never will. I'm losing out, as many of you know in that age group. That's where my age group is in terms of their friends in California or another part of the state. And that's how they communicate. I don't. That's okay. I choose not to, believe me. The last part I think that's really important around the legal topics is, as we make these decisions, please try to remind yourself that the decision is being based in the best interest of children, including your own. And I'll give you a couple of examples. When I send out these messages, lately in the last 5 years, what I've tried to do every time, if I have the direct access, is I don't do a phone call. I do a text message or text email. I do that because unfortunately I learned the hard way that when a murder happened in town and we had one of our students at the home and saw the murder of their mother, I called you. And so I had kindergartners at home picking up phones, right? Because they picked up phones. Hey, it's Dr. Bayer, he's leaving us a message. And they would say, I just said that somebody, That's what they do. I learned the hard way that that's not the right protocol for a situation like that. I need to text you or email you. Families that we don't have, but we have a few dozen families that's a problem, we're gonna, you know, make the live call. That's correct, 2016. And so the protocols are something that are constantly changing on my end. So some people will say, well, I didn't get that phone call. We looked at hard about what the topic was, and we decided we don't want to take a chance that a child's going to pick this up. High school student probably can deal with it. Middle school, some. K-5, I really worry about sending those types of messages. So we changed that protocol, just as one example of the always constant changing protocols. So let me end with this, and then we have 2 mics for Q&A to any of the panelists or myself or council that's here tonight. Let me end with 5 keywords. And interestingly mentioned in the police chiefs of Massachusetts, really best practices. Collaboration, check. Assessments, check. Prevention, check. Mitigation, check. Response, check. It is not perfect. It will never be perfect because of the topics that we're dealing with and the things that take place. Sandy Hook was devastating to those of us who can remember exactly where we were when it took place because of the age of the children that it happened with. High school, when we had our first one with Columbine, the first one I recall, last year we had 222 national threats to schools with guns. It was the most in the history of the United States. Okay? Now, mental health is a key component of this, as we all know, right? Access. We just recently read about the 6-year-old who shot the teacher. Now we got parents that are in a lot of trouble. Potentially their child's not going to be home. Their child at 6 years old. I mean, pretty devastating. And again, those are family issues that need to be addressed. But I wanted you to know about these, and please call us. Call us. The information that you share about support that your child needs is confidential. We can't give that information to just anybody. You actually have a parental rights form that you have to check off that says, I'm willing to give this information to this person and this person, but not this person. Or not this is not, I want to work with, you know, Sarah's Village, but I don't want to work with this organ. You can tell us that, and we carry it out on your behalf and support you on the way. I can do that for 180 days, because that's what my staff is here. There are some national bills being filed around extending these types of services, more with wraparound services with local organizations than just school personnel. Okay, thank you for coming out. We will take questions, and we have one right down here.
How do you reach out, make a contact, communicate this information?
In terms of? Oh, in terms of, okay, so you can do it one of a couple of ways. You yourself can reach out to the student's administration in the building, who then will give you the proper person to speak to based on the situation. You can call the guidance counselor in that building, the adjustment counselor. You can go right to the web page, and it'll say school adjustment counselor. Those are the trained staff members. You put their email, you email them, you say who you are, you say, can I get a phone call with you? I'm having some issues with my child, and then we can go through the process of all the resources that are available to you. You can call the director of PPS, Vinnie Cersei, directly, and or email. Email is always the best way because we are driven by our emails because of what we do, that we have our cell phones on us all the time. So that's an opportunity for us to respond pretty quickly.
I would say sometimes folks are a little uncomfortable, right, come to us first. We have a very active and supportive special education pack, and you do not have to have a student who is currently on an IEP, and they are often, you know, somebody that a parent can have a conversation about. Maybe it's a difficult topic, and they can help guide you as well. So sometimes folks don't want to come to us directly, and I understand that, privacy, but they need somebody else maybe who's gone through this. As I said, our CPAC is super supportive. It would absolutely help you through that and then help you make the connections if you decide to go that direction.
As far as like completely outside of school, family resources basically an umbrella organization. There's all different facets that they can kind of steer things and help things as far as resources and support. That's another very, very good resource that's out there.
In the back.
Thanks. This isn't exactly a question, it's more sort of a question. So I'm one of the families where we benefited from the extraordinary resources that are provided through EPO. I just want to say how much I appreciate that, because I spent 2 years trying to find a counselor, and as you stated, there are none available. I know there's a lot of families that had worse issues than we did, but we finished those 10 visits, and it was tremendously helpful. It wasn't easy to access, though. It took a long time to find out that that was a service that I could access, and so I guess my request is as a follow-up to this, we got 4 texts today about this meeting. Can we get a text about who to talk to or how to access these services, or what, is there a web page that is the best resource, something like that? I would really appreciate it. If you don't mind, if I'll make one more comment. I'm originally from Minneapolis, so I have a particular view about the police, and I just want to say that I'm quite comforted by what I'm hearing here today about the school resource officers that have a lot of anxiety about police in the schools. And I just want to say that I'm really grateful to hear that people are building relationships in the schools, and I'm feeling a lot more settled about that particular issue, so thank you for that.
Well, thank you for those 2 wonderful comments on the recommendation. Yes, we are working to change our website to have a section under mental health and a separate section, and included in that section on substance abuse. That's going to be one of the things that we're working on, so that we can text out and say, and I'll give you an example, when we've had those unfortunate situations like a few years ago with a murder in town, if you remember, you might recall, I sent out emails with attached resources to the American Psychological Association. How do you talk to your kindergartner about a situation like that, so on and so forth. So those are great resources, and thank you for the positive comments about our SROs, and for sharing that story. That's pretty powerful. I'm sitting up here and I had the chill, so thank you so much. Yes?
And I'm also gonna pass that on. I don't know why it's not working. Right. Anyway, I'm gonna pass that on to Sarah's Village, because those are the stories, and that's what they're hoping to accomplish by supporting us and work with everyone. So I will definitely pass that on to them.
In the back.
So I have 2 kindergartners at LG, twins, and I hear a lot about mental health, which makes my heart swell. Curious if any of the active shooter drills happen with the kids to prepare them for how to respond, and if so, what is being done to reduce their anxiety in those very trying situations?
So I'll start, and then I'll turn it over to our SROs and the chief. That's a fantastic question. So our protocols under the ALICE is slightly changing. The language that's being used is moving towards, instead of this K-12 protocol language, is now moving towards a age-appropriate language in terms of what it means. We do have a number of students with anxiety issues where we're trying to find ways to, if you will, communicate what a certain practice may be. One of the things we do with our SROs is if we decide that we're going to do a practice drill, we actually communicate with you ahead of time and say, we're going to be doing some drills with the students around our protocols, such as a response to a significant incident in their school or whatever the case may be. But you're absolutely right. The language in terms of the younger kids and getting to them is something that the ALICE protocols, which has been in place for about 10, 12 years, is now recognized that it needs to use some different language because of the age group of certain students. We are also practicing with our staff specific drills in how to lock down the room and where to go and all of that stuff. I'll turn it over to the SROs if they have some other comments.
I would just, I guess, dovetail on the end of that. We've certainly, it's not a process that we take lightly. It's not something that we do haphazardly. A lot of thought goes into that. We try to be very age appropriate, if you will. we've done work with single students, small groups, classes. As Dr. Vader referred to, we did in August, the return to school trainings. We had the full staff go through some stuff with both of us. And all of that it's not pretty stuff, but we try to make it as easy to kind of work through and work with as possible. And he referred to Sandy Hook. I've used this reference many times in the past during trainings. First graders in that school in Connecticut didn't have the teacher to help them anymore, and they were able to figure out and take steps to get themselves safe and get to the best outcome they could in that scenario. So we look at that too and embrace with that too. We encourage the teachers to talk with their kids and prepare, what they might need to do in their room or leave their room or whatever it might be, depending on the circumstance. But that's a lot of thought goes into that. It's not just running through running bulls and just going crazy. There's a lot of thought, a lot of process with all that to do it the right way and to make it as minimally worrisome and painful as possible.
What we've done in the past in a couple of the elementary schools is we'll go in and do a lockdown drill with them. We'll get down on the floor with them, we'll tell them how and what they need to do, just so they feel comfortable, so they're not nervous. But they know why we're doing it. They're like, oh, there's somebody bad here, or something's wrong. Yeah, they're smart. They know what's going on, but they just need guidance. It's like, okay, yep, the police are gonna come, we're gonna do everything to help you. You need to listen to your teacher. We talk and we do training with the teachers all the time, and they're told, hey, when things go bad, they're gonna look to you, right? So the teachers need to remain calm too. What we do and what we've done in the past is, in reference to Alice, we having 2 SROs, which is really good. We get to go to the teachers individually and talk to them. They'll come to us, hey, can you come give us a scenario, and let's see how we do. So we can practice with the teachers individually or answer questions to them besides the training that we do all the time.
I think it's, yes, sir.
So thank you very much. I'm actually very new to the town of Norton. I moved here about a year and a few months ago. I have 2 young children at LG. Just a couple points. I commend and appreciate all the staff, handmaids, janitors, lunch people, SROs, everybody else for what they do for our children at these schools. One of my sons has so many of your stickers. He should be on the payroll. And you might have get it in about 15 years or so. But one comment that has gotten to me, one criticism that I have is communication with parents in regards to some of these lockdown drills. We got a text message a month ago or a couple months ago, could have been 2 weeks ago, for all I know, about a stay-in-place order. As a parent, what does that mean? What happened? What was the process? I pictured doors slamming, locks shutting, and whatever. So the worst goes through my mind. I'm sure other people's minds. So I would like to have a little bit more communication, and maybe I'm just on maintenance, but I don't think so, for what that process is. I did call the school to hopefully get some more information. I understand the legal issues involved in that, but a little bit more communication with parents, I think, could be in order. A little bit, I'm not saying not sensitive, but a little bit more sensitivity could be in order.
So my response in general is we have been having internal discussions about the lingo that's used and how to define it so that when you do get a stay in place or a lockdown, you know what that means. You know the difference between one and the other. Stay in place is traditionally non-emergency. It's not a gun issue or any of that. It may be, we just don't want a kindergartner to see a staff member going out on an into an ambulance, that type of stuff. Or it may be, it's typically those type of situations. Could be a student who's acting up in one of the classrooms, and we're just trying to keep everybody safe. But I would definitely take that constructive criticism back to the team to continue to consider that.
And one more point, if you are having these drills, if you communicate with the parents on what the message that you're giving the students during some of these drills or some of these activities, so that the parents can be aligned with the message, hopefully be aligned with the message. That way we're not giving them mixed, our children, our young children, mixed signals, and everything else like that. So.
And we have received this criticism before, to be quite honest. It is such a difficult line that we're trying to keep around a teachable moment, and you're absolutely right. Your child going home and saying, I did this today, I would always prefer that they hear it from us first before that kindergarten gets off and said, hey, we played blah, blah, blah today, and there was a bad situation in school. So I think it's one of the things we could definitely put to paper. What are the type of scenarios? Kind of like if you wanted a copy of the curriculum, the math curriculum, we could probably put some stuff to paper that says when we practice this is what it means. This is the type of language that we use. So when the child goes home, they're saying we have to stay in place, and you're saying, I don't even know what the heck that means. So yeah, I think that's constructive. Thank you for that. Yes?
Is there a protocol in place for students with disabilities? I have 3 sons with autism, and some of them have vocal tics and stereotypies that during a drill or having to be in an actual situation, they're not going to be able to control their voice or emotion.
Right. So we've just recently become more, if you will, aware of some of these situations, especially in reaction. We just had one this year in reaction to fire drills, where we have a student that really needs communication, that it's a drill, that something's going to go off and so on. So the chief and the deputy fire chief have both committed to us to try to provide that communication ahead of time to the building principal so that we can then put things into place. It's not going to be perfect. What happens if the principal isn't in that day? What happens if... But we are trying to figure out the balance, and this is actually just a piece of research that I sent to Vinny. There's a memo that just came out, or actually a finding about balancing between safety and individual rights in terms of a child on an IEP. It's a very interesting article because it really is pushing us to find as many opportunities and options to make sure that a child on an IEP that has that sensory type of issue, we can try to find the preventative way to not allow for it to happen. The negative is trying to do it at 100% it's just the scenarios are such. But if we were planning out a drill or a situation of using the SROs, then we should be able to say, so what are we doing for our child who's autistic who has ABC? How do we best communicate that to the parents? We've had some parents who respond by just keeping the child at home. I don't think that's a good idea, but that's, I guess, a parental decision to a certain extent. We had a situation with the COVID dogs where we had a student at one of our buildings where the parent requested, please don't have my child around the dog because then the rest of the day is going to go nuts, right, in terms of their inability to handle that situation. A response by an individual student that can happen to anybody, and anybody who's scared of a dog knows that if you see a dog, it's not the first thing you want to deal with. So imagine if you're a young child. So we put a protocol in place for those the comfort dogs visit, so that the student doesn't even know that the dog is there, and so on and so forth. Now, it could get back to them that the dog was there because students talked during lunch and all that stuff, but we at least are attempting that they are not even anywhere near where the animal might be, as one idea.
I think the other thing that we do is the staff in the programs. We do preview and reviews. We use those same kind of best practices, visual supports and so forth. But the reality is, if you're doing a lockdown and unfortunately it's a real situation, we have to do our best to make sure the staff and the other students are in a calm way. We bring, make sure that we have access to sensory tools and all of those things right there, so that we can do our best to keep those vocalizations down. But that's kind of the reality of that situation, and the staff are pretty well trained in dealing with crises, because we have them often day to day, like that.
I wasn't me, for the record.
And then, so those things that we do for best practice on a day-to-day basis for other types of situations are what we use. But, you know, as my coordinator of special ed who worked in these programs in private settings years ago said, you know, this particular, she worked with students who had really low cognitive skills and would verbalize almost like they were 6 months older. You can't stop that. They're not understanding what's happening, so we have to be prepared, right, and do our best. But those are the realities of our situation. But we do have all those best practices. Like I said, when we have opportunities, we do preview and review. And I think it's important for us to do that because they need more practice. So oftentimes, if we know, for example, at the LG that they're going to be doing something like that, those teachers are doing some of that work ahead of time. Maybe not the entire thing, but, you know, what we might see Officer Robo today, we might have to practice being quiet. Like, those are the kinds of things that we're going to go through, just like we would with any change to their schedule, right? Then we have to do best practice.
If I can say one more thing, I see my son is on the spectrum as well, and it's very concerning to me, and it kind of ties back to mental health at a young age to help build that. It's my job to help him be the most confident, strong person that he can be. But looking at the staff and how they handle not just my son, but other children with other disabilities, if you will, very caring, very accepting, inclusive. I've told Mr. Higgins this already before. It absolutely warmed my heart. It was something that is always a concern of mine and will always be a concern of mine, but between the SROs and the staff and the teachers, I feel a great sensitivity there. So I just want to say I appreciate it.
Thank you for that. So on behalf of my colleagues, if you wouldn't mind thanking them for taking some time tonight, thank you very much to all of you for coming out. Oh, we have a follow-up? All right, we'll take the follow-up.
I'm trying to figure out the right way to ask this question, and I don't have the right way. I think we all are aware of fentanyl out there.
Hmm.
I'm starting with a question. What is the protocol for any drugs being dealt to dealers, the users? How is the situation being handled? Kids start using, or teachers noticing behaviors, parents notified, how is it being dealt with?
Yeah, so there's a couple different ways. Dealing with a user versus dealing with a dealer in school go in two very different roads. Right, so the first road, let's just go with the dealer. We have information. Unlike the police department, my administration only needs an inkling of information to have a student go through a protocol of being asked to be searched. Police need probable cause. I don't. My administrators don't. Could be, and it's happened, it could be a student simply goes and says, I know that Joe Byett is selling drugs up in the 200 wing. It's enough for me to say, let's bring in Joe Byett and let's go through that process. Parents become involved right away because of the search process. Biggest issue right now that we're seeing is the vaping. To be quite honest, that's the number one thing that we're seeing within our schools is constant vaping. The situation then becomes a potential one of two more roads. One is a legal issue of distribution of drugs within the school building, which becomes a law and court issue, potential suspension up to 90 days from school. Or the second route in today's world of distribution is let's get the parents involved with the courts and let's seek an alternative route to being at home, jailed, and so on and so forth with some type of an ankle bracelet or any other things that could happen. In other words, can they and are they willing to go through their own substance abuse program, working with the school department and so on and so forth. If it's an issue of a user, a student who all of a sudden we're seeing some situations of concerns of being high, but as an example, that starts with the administration and the school nurse and parental call, and then from there, potential request for drug screening, which is a parent decision. In other words, go down and get screened, show us that you're not on drugs. That's a parent decision. It's not required of you to do it as a parent, but if we think and we're recommending it, and nurse is saying it's a good idea, we push the parents to do it. May happen, may not. I can tell you there are times it does happen, there are times it doesn't happen. And then lastly on that would be what type of substance abuse support does that student need outside of school and also during school. And I decide would be one of the curriculums we use, which is a written curriculum around making good choices around issues of substance abuse.
But also connects them with Mass General's substance abuse program, so it allows opportunities for them to receive treatment.
Roby?
One of the things that we do at the middle school, we teach Project Alert. You can look it up online. What it is, it's like the old DARE program, but it's changed a little bit. It's a lot of interaction with the kids. They get up, they do a lot of role playing, they have a lot of questions. Part of our instruction is we discuss drugs and what the outcomes are and what can happen to you. Fentanyl is one of the educations that we tell them about. We don't get into great detail. The kids know what it is, but try to advise them, hey, you stay away from that. Come to us, tell somebody right away. So they are getting education on it at a young age.
The town of Norton, through the police chief, Chief Clark, also has a task force called NOPE, Norton Opioid Prevention and Education. It is a combination of everything from the district attorney's office to support services and programming throughout the area, the region, Bristol County. That group meets 4 to 5, sometimes 6, 7 times a year. And it's all around the idea of what's going on. We get the statistics around how many overdoses, who was passed in terms of the age, gender, so on and so forth. Is it a connection to the Norton Public Schools? Is it an uncle? Is it a parent? Is it whatever it may be? And how are we reacting to that in terms of providing the family support if needed because there's a child within the school system? Those are other issues as well. Vinny?
Also, one of the best things that we have to have as far as safety is how many great kids that we have in Norton that hear the messages year after year from all their teachers, from the parents. Because the most important information I've ever got as an administrator comes from kids who know something's wrong, another student or situation who report it to us. And that is the biggest safety net that we have. The stuff that we do every day, the messages we send overtly or just weave into our curriculum, to what you say at home, because kids give us the most important information to act on. And that's where we get actionable stuff that then we can pull all these resources together and make stuff happen. And that's really,
And I think the biggest safety net we have. We also have our community partners who that they will work with us. So sometimes the students will go to them, a counselor, a mentor, and say, hey, I just want you to, I don't maybe feel comfortable doing it, but can you let the school know A, B, and C, and then we can take a look into that. So, happy day.
Question?
It ties in with mental health and the security on the schools. I have children all over Norton, and I don't know about me, but I've talked to other parents, and it seems so easily accessible to get into the schools. You just get buzzed in. And yeah, she has a friendly face, you're gonna hold the door. And it's mental health. Yeah, I might be a mom with a kid outside walking into the school, but you don't know what I have on me, you don't know what the kid might have on them, and we're just walking into the school because we just got buzzed in. And I was wondering if you have any other projects going on for that safety.
We do. We have some thoughts that you're not going to like because it's going to make it more difficult for you to get into the building. We are hearing some holes in the system, there's no doubt. Many of it is, oh, I know her. She's Danny's mom. She's picking them up or whatever.
Right.
We need to go to intercom systems outside the building, why are you coming and all that type of stuff. We do use our check-in system. There's also, and I hate to say, there's only so much we can do, and that's the biggest problem of this. I will tell you that every school but one now has a double entry. We have requested and have in our capital plan money for the school that doesn't have a double entry lock. That would be camera, that'd be double entry. So you get buzzed in, then you get buzzed in the second time. So,
right. And the school that my son does attend does have that double entry, but again, it's still so easily accessible to get through.
yes.
And I have researched, and other people have researched, that there's programs out there like where you have like a kiosk. You have to have an appointment to get in. It's called through, there's a program called School Pass. I don't know if you're aware of it, but I think it's something that maybe the town should look into.
We don't disagree with you at all. It is all discussions that are taking place internally. I can assure you of that. It is a lot of times prioritizing the way the funding goes. It is what it is. You know, there's only so much. I will tell you that the kiosk, which has become relatively a new process that's happening, isn't as quote expensive. I hate to use that word. It's all the software that goes with it that becomes most of the issue. The other issue that we've talked about is building out those entrances and actually having someone at the door, like an administrative assistant whose sole job is to play the role of receptionist. So you have to go through that process before the second door opens. None of the buildings have that type of physical opportunity right now. We'd have to build out certain areas, but we have, Wade Lazard is here, our director of facilities. We've had some good discussions about potentially saying we're going to have to do X, Y, Z. Our biggest issue that we have, and the one that we're trying to really drill down, is people that are not supposed to be in the building. People that are coming to the building, why are you here? In other words, you will not be allowed until you make a phone call and tell us the reason why you're coming. You know, I had an emergency at home, dad's in the hospital, I need to pick up my kids, bring them to grandma's before I go to the hospital, something like that. Now again, the person could still be lying, could still be an issue, but those are some of the protocols that we are having some hard discussions about in terms of, if you just show up out of the blue, it doesn't matter if we know your face, we're not going to let you in, unless we have some preventative stuff, so thank you for that. Peter.
Yes, I remember the air drill stuff. I remember back in the 90s when I was a student, and I recall those very well, and it's not between the air skids back, and also when I was at high school, I would get buzzed in.
Yes, thank you, Peter, very much. It's not perfect, right? I went back, I purposely used that word at the beginning of this. We know that this is a continuing of every day, every year, just beating the drum of the next thing that we want to be able to do. Thank you all very much for taking the time. We really appreciate that you've decided to prioritize this to you and your families. Please share this. This will be online. It will be, the PowerPoints will be there. And please utilize email to reach out to me or any of my administrators if you so wish. Thank you for coming out. Have a great evening.
Hi, Derek.